Halloween can sometimes become very scary. People dress up in all sorts of costumes and go trick-or-treating to get some candy. Some people go that extra mile to try and scare people. You will often find people seated as a group telling scary stories as they enjoy some candy. Still, some people throw Halloween parties where everyone is in costume. However, there are times when it is too much, turning into a horror. Today, I will tell you some true Halloween horror stories. These are all true stories. The Man Who Killed Halloween. On Halloween night of 1974, Timothy O'Brien went trick-or-treating with his sister Elizabeth and two other children in Pasadena. The kids were accompanied by Timothy's father Ronald and another parent. Timothy was only 8 years old at this time. The night started with a lot of fun, but nobody knew it would end in tragedy. The group went from door to door knocking and asking for some candy. They then came up to a house, and when they knocked, it was as if no one was home. They moved on to another house without wasting time, but Ronald stayed behind in case someone answered the door. He eventually reunited with the group, carrying 5 pixie sticks with him. He claimed they were given to him by the homeowner, who was just taking his time answering the door. He then gave each of the children a pixie stick, and the extra one was given to a random kid. Their night was cut short when it started raining, and they all had to return home. Before bed, young Timothy asked his parents whether he could have a piece of candy before bed, and when he was given permission, he decided to start with the pixie stick. The moment he put the powdery candy into his mouth, he immediately started complaining that it was unusually bitter. When Timothy realized something was wrong, he immediately rushed to the bathroom. At this point, he had started having severe stomach pains. Shortly after, Timothy fell and started to convulse, but within no time, he'd already passed away. After a pathology report, it was found that the pixie stick he had consumed was laced with potassium cyanide. It was said he had taken enough to kill 2 adults. Luckily enough, none of the other kids had taken their pixie sticks, but they all tested positive for potassium cyanide. After some investigation, it was found that Ronald, Timothy's own father, was the one behind the poisoning of the candy. His main aim was to end the lives of his children so that he could claim their life insurance payouts and pay off some debts. The debt was over $100,000. What kind of father does that? He was eventually sentenced to death, and his execution occurred on March 31st in 1984. This was truly the man who killed Halloween. Beheaded Mother. Halloween was coming up and people were preparing for it on Long Island. However, just before Halloween in 2014, a decapitated body was lying in the street about 5 feet away from a severed head. However, since most people were just getting ready for the upcoming Halloween, nobody really paid attention to this body. They all thought it was just another Halloween prank. But later on, the truth turned out to be so disturbing. It was discovered that 35-year-old Derek Ward had decapitated his mother and dumped her body on the street. Investigations revealed that she was decapitated shortly before 8 p.m. using a kitchen knife. When this happened, they were in the second-floor apartment they shared. It is then said that the son either dragged or carried the dead body down the stairs, through the lobby, and finally left it on the street. About half an hour later, after the mother's body was found and reported, Derek Ward also decided to take his own life. He jumped in front of a Long Island Railroad train heading east from Penn Station in Manhattan. The motive as to why Derek decided to do this will never really be known now. Freddy Krueger attacks. Everything was okay on Halloween night and parties were going on as usual. In San Antonio, Texas, there is a Halloween party, and it was wild. However, things were about to take a turn. Around 5 a.m. on the following day after Halloween, a group of males decided to join the party. However, from the moment they got there, they started causing trouble. Eventually, one of the men who was dressed as Freddy Krueger started opening fire on the crowd. If you know your horror movies, you'll remember Freddy Krueger, the horrifically scarred, homicidal villain of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Eventually, this man dressed as Freddy Krueger managed to shoot 5 people. Talk about crashing a party. Even weirder was that he was uninvited, so nobody knew the guy. Wrong address. About 30 years ago, Yoshiro Hattori, a 16-year-old Japanese exchange student, decided to celebrate his Halloween by dressing up as John Travolta's character from Saturday Night Fever. He was supposed to go to a Halloween party in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but things did not go as planned. Everything took a turn when he was dropped off at the wrong house. When the homeowner of the address where he was dropped off saw Hattori, he immediately panicked at the sight of the unexpected visitor. The homeowner, a 30-year-old supermarket owner, yelled at Hattori to freeze, but Hattori misunderstood the command and kept approaching. Eventually, the homeowner fired a .44 caliber Magnum bullet into Tori's chest at nearly point-blank range, and the young boy died even before he could be taken to a hospital. When the homeowner was charged with manslaughter, he invoked the Castle Doctrine defense, whereby Americans have the right to apply lethal means to protect their homes. Because of this, the jury found him not guilty. On the 20th anniversary of their son's death, Makayo, Tori's mother, said, "I've been observing American society for the past 20 years. The ongoing situation there has been incomprehensible for the Japanese. I want to encourage more ways to adopt gun control. Trick or treat and die." It was 1982 and Marvin Brandlin was quite tired of handing out Halloween candy. Marvin, who was 69 years old at the time, was getting ready to go to bed when he heard one more knock at his door. Thinking that it was just another trick-or-treater, Brandlin opened the door. He found someone wearing a pillowcase over their heads with the holes cut out for their eyes. However, it later turned out this was not the usual trick-or-treater, like the rest of Brandlin had served up with candy. The figure behind the pillowcase said, "Trick or treat. Give your money or I'll shoot." He immediately pulled a gun and ordered Brandlin into his basement, where Brandlin kept his safe. Brandlin thought this was a prank by one of his family members, given that they were the only ones who knew about the safe. Thinking that there was no harm, he immediately reached for the gun. However, the moment he did this, the person in the pillowcase fired. The bullet hit Brandlin in the throat, killing him instantly. The killer fled, leaving the pillowcase at the scene. And even though the pillowcase was matched for DNA in 2010, there was not enough DNA on it to make a proper match. The Stepfather from Hell. On Halloween of 1984, Brian Macy, who was 8 years old at the time, was not a very happy boy. This was mainly because he could not go trick-or-treating with his sisters, Tiffany and Tamara, who were both 11 and 10 years old respectively. However, none of them were able to go trick-or-treating. They were instead part of a real-life horror film, all thanks to their known stepfather, girls down the hall and murdering them. Andrew then went into Macy's room covered in blood, and he proceeded to kidnap the boy. About 2 days later, the police managed to find Macy alive after arresting Andrews for his crimes. Andrew had failed to kill himself at this point. However, years later, Andrews entered a plea in exchange for a reduction of charges, and when this happened, Macy, who was all grown up, was very unhappy about this. Have you heard of any spooky or true Halloween stories? Feel free to let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll spook you in the next one.